Picture standing in line at an airport and noticing someone nearby who looks almost human, but not quite. Broader shoulders, thicker bones, larger eyes, a face built for a frozen world that vanished thousands of years ago. And yet they're holding a passport, checking flight times, texting someone they love. In another version of history, that wouldn't be strange at all. Because for most of human history, we were never alone. For hundreds of thousands of years, another intelligent human species walked beside us. They hunted with us, lived beside us, had children with us, and then, somehow, they disappeared. But what if they hadn't? 40,000 years ago, Europe belonged to the Neanderthals, not as wandering cavemen stumbling through the cold, but as masters of one of the harshest environments on Earth. They weren't primitive. They were specialized, perfectly designed for a world that no longer exists. They had survived massive ice ages, brutal climate swings, and predators that would terrify most modern humans. Cave lions, giant hyenas, mammoths, woolly rhinoceroses. And then we arrived. Homo sapiens entered Europe as outsiders. We came from warmer climates. We were thinner, weaker, less adapted to the freezing north. Yet within a few thousand years, the Neanderthals were gone, while we spread across the planet. At least, that's the official ending to the story. Because the truth is stranger than extinction. Right now, millions of people carry Neanderthal DNA inside their bodies. Not traces, not contamination. Real inherited genetic material passed down from human Neanderthal relationships tens of thousands of years ago. Which means this wasn't a war between monsters and humans. It was two kinds of humans sharing the same world. And if history had shifted only slightly, both might still exist today. The first thing people get wrong about Neanderthals is intelligence. For decades, museums portrayed them as hunched, slow, animal-like creatures. But modern archaeology completely destroyed that image. Neanderthals buried their dead. They used medicine. They made tools with astonishing precision. They created jewelry from shells and animal teeth. Some evidence even suggests they painted cave walls long before modern humans reached those regions. And their brains were actually larger than ours. The average Neanderthal brain was bigger than the average Homo sapiens brain today. Not by a tiny margin either. Their skulls held enormous visual processing centers adapted for low-light Ice Age conditions. Imagine trying to survive in a gray world filled with volcanic dust, endless winters, and dim sunlight for generations. Their eyes evolved to handle conditions modern humans would struggle in. But there was a trade-off. While Neanderthals evolved into specialists, Homo sapiens evolved into generalists. They became masters of one environment. We became adaptable to all of them. That difference may have changed the fate of the planet. But now imagine a different outcome. Imagine Neanderthals survived the climate collapse around 40,000 years ago. Their populations recover instead of shrinking. Small groups remain hidden in mountain regions, frozen forests, and isolated valleys. Slowly, over thousands of years, they adapt alongside Homo sapiens instead of disappearing beneath them. Human civilization would immediately look completely different. History itself would split into two parallel experiences. The ancient world would have treated Neanderthals as both familiar and foreign at the same time. Early Homo sapiens societies likely would have created myths around them long before science understood what they actually were. Some cultures might worship them as ancient humans closer to nature, Others would fear them as rivals. And the terrifying part is, we already know how humans treat groups that look slightly different from themselves. Now imagine those differences are not skin deep. Imagine they are biological. Different skeletons, different brain structures, different physical abilities, different ways of thinking. The existence of another human species could have rewritten every major empire in history. Would Neanderthals have been enslaved by ancient civilizations, hunted, segregated, forced into isolated territories? Or would certain societies view them as sacred because of their survival abilities in extreme environments? Because physically, Neanderthals would dominate many environments that modern humans struggle in. They were massively powerful. Their bones show muscle attachments far beyond the average person today. Some researchers estimate that Neanderthals possessed grip strength nearly impossible for most modern humans. Their bodies were built for direct physical survival in brutal conditions. In a modern world, that would create enormous advantages. Mining, polar exploration, high-altitude survival, deep-sea industrial work, extreme military environments, any place where endurance against cold mattered more than speed. But their greatest advantage may not be physical. It may have been perceptual. Neanderthals likely experienced the world differently than we do. Their enlarged visual processing systems suggest heightened environmental awareness. Their thinking may have been more concrete, more spatial, more detail-oriented. While Homo sapiens built abstract symbolic systems like religion, finance, politics, and digital networks, Neanderthals may have excelled in direct physical understanding of the environment around them. Two human species, two entirely different cognitive styles. Now, imagine both reaching the technological age together. The Industrial Revolution alone becomes almost unrecognizable. Human cities were built around the physical limitations of Homo sapiens. But a second human species would force civilization to redesign itself. Tools, transportation, workplaces, military equipment, architecture, medicine, sports, even fashion would split into parallel systems. And eventually, the biggest question becomes impossible to avoid. Would they have equal rights? Because science can explain biology, but biology has never stopped humans from creating division. The moment civilization develops nationalism, race theory, colonialism, and industrial warfare, Neanderthals become trapped inside humanity's darkest instincts. Some governments would absolutely classify them as inferior. Others would romanticize them as pure humans. Entire political systems might emerge around the relationship between the two species, and history suggests one horrifying possibility. The 20th century could have become catastrophic beyond imagination, because now racism becomes something biologically measurable. Not just superficial differences between populations of the same species, but differences between entirely separate branches of humanity. World War II alone becomes terrifying to imagine. Would Neanderthals be drafted into armies, experimented on, exterminated by regimes obsessed with genetic purity? Or maybe something stranger happens. Maybe humans become obsessed with hybridization. Because this is the detail most people forget. Neanderthals and Homo sapiens could reproduce together. Successfully. Their children survived. Their DNA still exists, which means in a modern world, interbreeding between both species would probably continue for thousands of years. Entire populations of hybrids would emerge, blending traits from both lineages, and eventually, the line separating human and Neanderthal might start collapsing altogether. But not completely, because there is evidence that ancient hybrids were not perfectly compatible. Certain regions of the human genome actively rejected Neanderthal DNA over time. especially around fertility-related genes. That suggests there were biological limits to how fully both species could merge. So now civilization faces a question no society in history has ever answered. What happens when another intelligent human species exists beside us, but remains genetically distinct? That question alone could reshape philosophy forever. Religion would split apart, trying to explain them. Did they have souls? Were they descendants of the same creation story? Did they count as fully human? Some religions might embrace them, others might condemn them, and science would become obsessed with comparison. Who was smarter? Who adapted faster? Who lived longer? Who experienced emotion differently? Who was more violent? Who was more empathetic? Entire scientific fields would revolve around understanding the psychological differences between the two human species living side by side. But maybe the strangest consequence wouldn't be conflict. It would be perspective. Because the existence of Neanderthals would destroy humanity's illusion that we are unique. Right now, Homo sapiens see ourselves as the single surviving version of intelligence on Earth. We act as though human existence was inevitable. But living beside Neanderthals would constantly remind us that intelligence evolved multiple times inside the human family, that we were not destined. We were one outcome, and maybe not even the strongest one, because Neanderthals survived Europe for over 400,000 years. Modern civilization has existed for only a fraction of that time. There's another possibility too. Maybe Neanderthals would reject modern civilization entirely. Their smaller social groups and stable territorial lifestyles suggest they may not have built massive industrial societies like Homo sapiens. Instead, they might preserve isolated bioregional communities, living closer to environmental cycles, while modern humans expanded into hyper-industrialized megacities. And over time, some Homo sapiens might envy them. Imagine a world collapsing under climate disasters, overpopulation, artificial intelligence, and social fragmentation, while isolated Neanderthal communities remain stable in extreme environments humans can barely survive in. Suddenly, the species once viewed as primitive begins to look resilient, maybe even wiser, and that changes the entire emotional direction of history. Because this stops being a story about extinction. It becomes a story about divergence. Two intelligent species taking completely different paths through civilization. One building global technological systems, the other preserving deep environmental adaptation and slower communal existence. And eventually, both species would look at each other and wonder the same thing. Which path was actually better? But the truth is, this alternate world almost existed. For thousands of years, Homo sapiens and Neanderthals walked the same landscapes together. They saw the same stars, hunted the same animals, shared the same fires, and against all odds, they didn't just fight. Sometimes, they loved each other. That's why Neanderthals never completely vanished. Part of them survived inside us, inside our immune systems, our skin, our biology, our instincts. We are the final evidence that two human worlds once touched. And if history had unfolded just slightly differently, you might not be the only kind of human reading this right now. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe for more history mysteries.